Anele Mdoda versus Gok Helen Zille. Damn. In fact, before I get to my commentary on this interview, I think 94.7 owes us as the public who had to sit through and enjoy that interview. How long was it? 21 minutes? 94.7 needs to tell us by how many minutes, but how late was Helen Zille for this interview? Because I know at the end, Anele Mdoda made the comment that, well, next time, be on time. How late was Helen Zille? Because what else would have warranted that level of, hostility? Because even if Anele Mdoda and her crew completely disagree with Helen Zille and everything that she stands for, she's still the guest on the show, right? So you need to be hospitable in some way, even if you disagree with her, because you might disagree as a host, but not every single person who tunes into 94.7 disagrees or dislikes Helen Zille. So you also have to kind of be balanced as the host. That's more considered what is professional. So what I'm going to say, number one, is that it was clear to me that Anele Mdoda and her team, because this definitely felt like something that was coordinated amongst the entire 94.7 Breakfast team, was that the angle was that they are going to breathe new life into the sort of claim that a lot of people clearly do have. You see this on Twitter, even at the moment, the claim or the perception that people have about Helen Zille being anti-black and anti-transformation. Anele Mdoda, during the interview, mentioned or said it twice during the interview that she doesn't have an issue, or she doesn't doubt for a second, that Helen Zille is competent and capable to do the job as the mayor of Johannesburg. However, she kept circling back. She kept making the race thing sort of the main act. But here's where it gets a bit tricky, right? Because Anele Mdoda and her team, they're fully aware that, their show and their content, they have a high following, reaches far a lot of people, right? And not just the people in studio and their friends. They know that this message is going to the ears of a lot of people. A lot of people who so happen to be the majority in this country, who happen to be black. So with this in mind, we have to be careful that, and understand that every single black South African is a vote. At the end of the day, we are not friends with Anele Mdoda. We're not friends or related. Most of us are not related to Ramaphosa or anything like that. But where we have commonality is the fact that we are a vote. Every single black person in this country is a vote. If you're eligible, over 18, and you can vote, you are a vote. You are a vote to these people. That's it. So now if we reduce this power to a one single issue, where we say, as the black majority, as the black voters in South Africa, the only thing that matters to us is in relation to race. If we allow ourselves, because now Abu Anele Mdoda, they're definitely giving out the cues that if you want to win in Johannesburg, which is majority black, she said this to Helen Zille, you're going to have to come straight in certain things. Cool. All right, Anele, we hear you. But now if we reduce ourselves to just becoming a single issue sort of focused, voter base, that does weaken the power. That does weaken the democracy. Because now when you single yourself out to become a single issue sort of, voter, what happens is that all the people need to do is just to play to that one issue, nothing else. On the single issue aspect, BE, affirmative action, right? These two things have become, one, we know there's a lot of debate around them. Democratic Alliance, as well as other political parties. We tend to forget that other political parties have also come out strong, i.e., even the latest, the leader of BOSA, saying we need to relook the structure of BEE and whether or not BEE is serving people in the way that it's supposed to. Now, if you only look at BEE and affirmative action as the triggers, that when someone says not this, you suddenly triggered. In South Africa, according to the IC, there's about 1,700 registered political parties. From the 1,700, 350 political parties are currently active because 350 political parties appeared in the ballot in May of 2024. But now, how do we then celebrate the fact that we are a democracy if we are still driving this idea or accepting the fact that one party from the 1,700 parties that are elected, one party is the one that's going to have hegemony over the ideas and the solutions in our politics? I mentioned BE, I mentioned affirmative action. That is giving hegemonic power to just the African National Congress, because these are their solutions. BE is their solution. Affirmative action is their solution, right? That is how they foresee solving the issues of redress and transformation. So I want to show you guys an illustration here, right, on this sort of idea of having one single party having hegemonic power over what we regard as good solutions in our political system. Let's take China versus South Africa, right? I know we tend to link ourselves with China a lot. There's a lot of admiration for China by a lot of South Africans for whatever reason. So here's a diagram, right, to drive my point. China, in terms of their political system, they regard themselves, or what is reported is that China is a social democratic, authoritarian, one-party system. That's China. South Africa, on the other hand, is a democratic election system, meaning we have elections. Our leaders are elected through an electoral system. Majority wins. Majority gets the highest seats in parliament. It is a proportional representative system, and so forth, right? The ruling party in China, currently it is the Chinese Communist Party. In fact, not just currently, until forever, right? Because that's just how authoritarian states work. The Chinese Communist Party is currently ruling uncontested. The fact that they are a one-party system means that they are not contested. So they don't have the elections in the way that we do. You don't get to vote for them. They are there. Take it or leave it, love it or hate it. In fact, what is also reported about the way that the ruling or the party system in China is set up is that even if they are opposition members, even if there's people that are opposed, that are opposition parties, so to say, the Chinese Communist Party merely recognizes these people as just, lending their opinions and suggestions. And whatever the opposition parties suggest, the communist CCP has no obligation to follow that. They take it, or if they want to, if they don't accept it. So that's pretty much the iron fist control that the Chinese Communist Party has over China. Then you look at South Africa. South Africa, I mentioned this before, 1,700 registered political parties, 350 of those are currently active. The majority at the moment, or the one that has majority support, is the African National Congress. In terms of delivery, China, despite the fact that they don't practice democracy in the way that we know it, they don't get to elect their leaders, the CCP, as totalitarian and authoritarian as they are, the ruling party has managed to deliver for these citizens. They are the second biggest economy in the world, second to the United States of America. They have also grown at one of the fastest records ever recorded in terms of the economic growth, or the GDP growth year on year. So they've had fast growth. There's opportunities for the citizens in China. China is orderly, there's less crime, and all of these things, all the bells and the whistles. That is what the Chinese Communist Party has been able to deliver. South Africa, on the other hand, with our 1,700, 350 ANC majority, things are falling apart. The GNU now, which is supposed to be this multi-party coalition, has not brought any change, especially on the material basis. We are not seeing any difference. The economy is still slow, there's still crime and all of that. Then we get to the ruling party approach. The Communist Party in China, they are pro-centralization. They are all about controlling the economy, the media, policing, military. It is all controlled at the top by the Communist Party. In our case, despite the fact that we've got all of these guys in our political system, the ANC, which is the majority, is 100% aligned with the way China governs itself. ANC takes a lot of aspiration. They quote China, they adore China's system. They pro-centralization. Through this national democratic revolution, which then says that they are going to build this big state that's going to have control over every aspect of our society, including NHI, education, just big state control. That is the vision of the ANC as depicted in the National Democratic Revolution. Now we get to the limitations, right? In China, we painted the picture of what system is ruling them, who's in charge. It's a Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party. And to date, the Chinese Communist Party has prioritized delivering for their citizens. Even though, they are communists and they are centralized system and all of that, they really tough on corruption. They don't play games. If you're corrupt, if any of their leaders are corrupt, there is harsh punishment. for that kind of behavior. As a result, people are generally satisfied with the delivery that they're getting from the government. I spoke about the fact that they have opportunities, economy, they can grow their families. Things seem to be stable at the moment, right? They're probably looking at the West, in fact, in China, thinking, whoa, they don't want to deal with any of that, because the West, or sort of democratic systems, there's a lot of debate, whether you're on the left or the right. It's not just straightforward. You don't just get to a solution. Before you get to a decision, there's a lot of debate, because you have to accommodate different views and different value systems. In China, it's different. They probably just think, whoa, it's a mess over there, right? But there are limitations in the way that China has structured its political system, because now, under the Chinese Communist Party rule, you either sink or swim. You either love the system or you get the hell out, right? There's absolutely no room for disagreement. There's no room for pushback, because they are authoritarian at the end of the day. They control, right? That control does not allow for debate and all of these things that we see happening on any other side, which means that if the Chinese government gets it wrong, or if anyone in China opposes what the Chinese government is doing, they have only one way, which is to ship out, right? That's one way to put it. Hence, we are seeing a lot of young Chinese families moving all over the world, because you're not always going to agree with the government, right? That's a fact. And another thing that I'm going to say in terms of limitations of the Chinese system is that should things turn, should the economy weaken, should they lose out on opportunities, should they have to, do other things, there is no room, because they control every aspect of the country. There wouldn't be a room for an entrepreneur to pivot and any of that, because all of that is controlled by the government. So unless the government works, the people of China are completely indebted to the government. That is another serious limitation. In South Africa, the ANC has completely lost public trust for obvious reasons, right? It's getting worse by the day. But instead of South Africans saying, what other options do we have? Where else can we go? Where else can we look? What, maybe from the 350, what else is on offer, right? There seems to be a big limitation with our mental sort of approach. The psyche of the majority Black South African voter, that is the limitation. Because even if we have all of these things, instead what you tend to see is people choosing to abstain completely from politics, where they don't want to participate, they don't vote, they completely zone out. Despite the fact that the impact and all of these things are happening in their lives, they abstain. Our obstacle, our limitations is mental. Because even if you can look at Anele Mdoda's performance with this interview with Helen Zille and clap for her and say, you go girl, you tell them, wada. Can I just remind you guys that the current sort of economic direction around the world, right, is strongly favorable towards one sort of stability, which is 100% found in strong family units, right? If we can stay in our family sort of structures, instill the right values in ourselves, in our children, in our communities, adopt stability, which obviously the opposite to that would be, noise, alcoholism and all of that. If we can do the opposite, take care of ourselves, take care of our health, that stability, economic conditions and success in general has a lot of favor towards that. Secondly, success, or at least economic structures today or economic conditions today, have a lot of favor towards intellectual people who have good ideas to solving a lot of complex problems. So people who take time to read, people who take time to do their research, education, higher education, furthering your education, all of these things are highly favored by today's economic structure, and success loves people who are good thinkers, people who've got good ideas. Last but not least, success also has a lot of support for people who are willing to collaborate in order to create something sort of, a common goal, i.e. creating wealth. So economic conditions have a lot of support towards that kind of agenda, where you say, it doesn't matter where you come from, your creed, your race, your background, you have the idea, I have the warehouse, let's collaborate. That kind of mindset will lead to success. Success loves that kind of thinking. Now, I'm going to put this to you and say, Anele Mdoda's friends, Julius Malema, whoever, all of her friends, if you look at their politics is 100% against the family unit against the idea of education, upskilling. They say they are, but in action, they're not. They've broken the education system. And thirdly, these friends of Anele Mdoda are against collaboration. They want to see conflict. They want to see tension amongst different groups of society. Now you ask yourself, who does Anele Mdoda actually represent? And last but not least, to close here, the Democratic Alliance, right? I have to just make this point. Because I thought about why do they keep hitting the same wall time and time again? Because over and above what happened with 94.7, people are just ready. They love to hate the DA. It's very easy to hate the DA, right? Like people are just always ready. They bring receipts. They bring what happened in the past, what. And I just kept thinking, why is this? Like, why does it keep happening? And it just brought me to the fact that I think the positioning of the DA is what attracts this level of scrutiny, defense, and, this attack, basically, that we tend to see. The way they position this, the way they've positioned themselves, because now positioning is 100% intentional. You set out to say, we want to position ourselves as this player, depending on the environment, depending on where you play. They've intentionally decided to position themselves, not as a subtle sort of like, we'll let our results speak for itself kind of party. Instead, they come across, or they position themselves as a party that is bigger, better than anyone else, right? Where the DA governs, we govern better, the DA difference, things like that. So they've chosen to go with the position that is, more boastful, more, bold, and, they call out their successes, they call out what they believe they are, right? As opposed to saying, hey, we'll just, we'll be the humble guy, we'll be quiet. But you know what? When the time is right, people will see, we'll let the results speak for itself. And it's not to say that the results don't exist. Think of, for example, a Toyota, right? Toyota doesn't go on TV and say, we are Toyota, we are a strong brand. Don't play with us. People that drive Toyotas, people that know people who drive Toyotas are the ones that drive the perception about a Toyota car being a strong car that lasts for years and years and years. Toyota doesn't have to even put that in their billboard. Their customers, people that buy the product, understand it, right? Now in marketing, with this said, there's two things, right, when it comes to positioning and how you should kind of set yourself out. One, in marketing, we know for a fact that people have a strong appeal to the underdog, right? The guy who is kind of like subtle, but when the time is right, when they need to, they do what they need to do. Being the loud, proud, and, very confident person can easily be, brushed off as, someone who's arrogant. And for most people, that becomes really hard to digest and certainly hard to support. Secondly, in marketing, we also know that when you're building a brand, which now the Democratic Alliance is very much a brand, positioning is all in there. Your slogans are all within your brand. When you're constructing a brand, one of the most key things is that you need to become an easy choice, right? Most South Africans, right, do not necessarily live close to the politics of the day. They're not that involved, right? For them, they kind of stand at the distance. When it comes to elections, they stand in the lines, they cast their vote, and that's it. So now, if supporting you, if you're the Democratic Alliance, if those people who are neutral and not that involved, if now you want them to support you and that support becomes the hardest fight of their lives, right? You've already lost that person immediately. So going around and claiming that where the DA governs better, the DA difference, right? That's when now Anele Mdoda can then come to you in an interview and say, well, you seem to be doing well, but in the suburban areas, because now you claim to be perfect, right? Yet you know very well that you've got limitations because you're municipal, you're provincial, you're not national. People don't really care about that because you've already made the bold statement. You already told people, I am the guy. And then people can easily then say, well, why do your townships look dodgy if you are the delivery guy, the DA difference, right? And then that opens up to extreme scrutiny. Again, you're losing that guy who's just in the sidelines, who comes in when they need to come into politics. You make it difficult for them to support you. And the reality is that South Africa's electoral system gives every single eligible voter in South Africa across the board one vote. So it's not like, the DA members have 3 votes each. Each person has 1 vote. So your positioning cannot only appeal or cannot be set in such a way that it only appeals to people who, have the tough skin, people who don't mind to, endure the criticism, the hashtags and whatever. Because if you go on Twitter, especially in days like this where the day is on the spotlight, it can be so brutal. The neutral person who's just on the sidelines will not enjoy that. They will not enjoy the hashtags and all of these things because, there's just a mob that is always ready to attack. So your positioning has to bear this in mind, because you are not speaking to people who are either, have tough skin. You're not speaking to people who are already converted. You're not speaking to people who say, well, I don't care what Twitter says. I just need clean running water. People need clean running water. That is for sure. But at the end of the day, the choice for them to choose you has to be easy. And that becomes the job of your branding, the job of how you position yourself.